Today we're going to learn about half and whole steps, which are different musical intervals, which, as a reminder, is the distance between two different notes, that are very important to, well, just about everything in music. In order to explain this correctly, we have to know that a lot of the music that we learn in band and orchestra class is technically called Western music. And no, I don't mean Western like what your grandpa watches on TV, but consider the fact that the music that you learn to play in band and orchestra class originated in Europe, which is Western in terms of the Eastern Hemisphere. Now, this music started to come about long before the 1600s when we first settled in America, so for the people living at that time in this part of the world, this was the West. Now, you might be thinking, why do I need a history lesson to understand the difference between a half step and a whole step? Well, I'll tell you what. Our musical system uses a half step as the smallest distance between notes, but keep in mind that there are lots of other cultures out there that originate in music in different ways, and they might use larger or smaller intervals from one note to the next. American and European music students should be very familiar with the chromatic scale. This scale uses all 12 unique notes in our musical alphabet, arranged from low to high without skipping a single one in between. Remember, we use half steps as our smallest distance between notes, so every note in this scale is only a half step higher than the last. If you were to look at a piano keyboard, which of course has all of the different notes we have access to in the Western musical alphabet, it would be pretty easy to play a chromatic scale because you just start on any note on the keyboard and play in ascending order. Percussionists tend to like that one. Unfortunately for our friends who play keyed instruments, it's not nearly as easy on, say, the saxophone or clarinet. Anyways, those are all half steps. The distance between B and C is a half step. The distance between E flat and E is a half step. Any time where you have two keys next to one another with nothing in between them, they have a half step relationship. That's the interval between those two notes. Here are a few songs that will help you remember what a half step sounds like. My favorite one, Jaws, has a half step featured pretty prominently in the theme. And the Pink Panther theme has tons of half steps. But when you skip a note in between two piano keys, in other words, play two half steps, you play a whole step instead. Makes sense. A whole is equal to two halves. An example of this would be A to B, because you skip the B flat key in between, or B to C sharp, because you skip the C key in between. Both examples are a whole step. The first two notes in a major scale are a whole step apart, so that would be a good way to remember this. But you could also use the song Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Bum ba-dum bum is both a whole step up and then a whole step down right after it. So to sum it all up, let's compare half steps to whole steps. A half step is the smallest distance between two notes, in Western music that is, whereas a whole step is the distance of two half steps combined. A half step is two neighboring piano keys. You don't skip anything in between, but with a whole step, you skip one key. Half step sounds like Jaws or Pink Panther, and a whole step sounds like Happy Birthday, or the first two notes of a scale. And last but not least, another name for a half step is a minor second, whereas another name for a whole step is a major second.